The gauge for the most of the China National Railway network is standard gauge. Currently, in the National Railway network, only the 1000 mm meter gauge Kunming Phong Railway uses narrow gauge, and it is expected to be converted into standard gauge soon. In addition, there are some industrial lines still using narrow gauge, mostly 2 feet 6 in narrow gauge or 600 mm narrow gauge. As of 2003, 600 plus km narrow gauge railways, 50,000 plus km standard gauge railways, and 9.4 km broad gauge railways were in use in mainland China. Operational narrow gauge railways. Kunming Railway. The 1000 mm meter gauge Kunming Railway was built by French colonists between Vietnam and China. It is now inoperative for passengers due to landslides, but does have freight services. This railway opened in 1910, had a 600 mm gauge branch line from Caoba to Shipping, which operated 0100 tender locos built by Baldwin Locomotive Works. The meter gauge section was originally administered in more or less the same way as the Indo-Chinese networks, and it was physically possible for through trains to be run from Kunming to Singapore, as meter gauge was used in both these countries. During the Japanese occupation, Japanese National Railways Class 9600280 locomotives were shipped to aid their invasion, and after the completion of the Death Railway, it was possible for a time for through traffic to Burma. This is now impossible as sections of this railway have been destroyed during the conflict since World War II. Industrial railways in Manchuria. Lumber industries built narrow gauge railways into the forests. These used Russian and Japanese locomotives, copied from Soviet or Eastern European designs. Now most of them have disappeared. These railways mostly use a gauge of 2 feet 6 in, 3 feet 6 in gauge railways. Several 3 feet 6 in gauge railways were constructed by the Japanese. Manchuria. There were several 3 feet 6 in gauge military railways in Manchuria during the Russo-Japanese War. These Japanese military railways, which includes a section converted from the 1520 mm Russian gauge Chinese Eastern Railway, used Japanese national railways stock and were quickly converted back to standard gauge after the war to facilitate through traffic with the British-controlled Peking Mactan Railway, which was standard gauge. As a result, the South Manchurian Railway, a creation of the Japanese Kwantung Army, was standard gauge. Hainan. In 1941–43, during the Japanese occupation of Hainan, several 3 feet 6 in gauge rail lines were constructed in the western part of the island. Of particular importance for the Japanese war effort was the line connecting the iron ore mine in Shilu with the Basuo harbor. The lines fell into disrepair and were abandoned after the fall of Hainan to the Communists in April 1950. They were rebuilt and converted to the standard gauge between the mid-1950s and 1985. Now they form part of the Hainan Western Ring Railway. Meter gauge railways. Meter gauge railways were popular in China in several regions before the 1949 Communist Revolution. Several lines were constructed with the intention to join all the railways, forming a new sphere of influence for the French which never materialized. Kunming Railway. The 466 km Chinese section of the French-built Kunming Phong Railway. Shijiazhuang to Taiyuan. The railway from Shijiazhuang to Taiyuan was opened at the turn of the 20th century. It was French and Belgian-controlled, since it was a feeder of the Belgian-controlled Peking-Hankow Railway. To minimize costs, it was built to the same 1000 mm meter gauge of the Kunming Railway, with the hope that the latter could be extended to Shanxi province. The railway was built to the nature of a light railway and used used rolling stock built in France and Belgium. Datong to Pukou. The railway from Datong to Pukou opened in 1933, which was funded by the Japanese and controlled by the Shanxi warlord Jan Zishan, and which connected the Shijiazhuang-Taiyuan Railway at Taiyuan, had to be built to meet the gauge as well. The Datong-Pukou Railway used rolling stock built by Japanese companies. Even withdrawn old Japanese National Railways or Imperial Taiwan Railway stock gauge looming Shanxi Railway in Qing Dynasty. When the Japanese invaded the Shanxi and Hebei provinces during the Sino-Japanese War, these two railways were converted to standard gauge. Yunnan-Burma Railway. The 1000 mm meter gauge Yunnan-Burma line was built from 1941 but had to be aborted due to Japanese advances, and has never been completed. Other in many rural or suburban areas, meter gauge railways were built to transport agricultural produce. Such was the case of two light railways east of Pudong, Shanghai. They were isolated systems using small tank engines, like 4 to 4-2 teraseconds. Later experiments were made with gasoline railcar and trailer sets having Ford engines. They were closed in the 1950s and 1970s respectively and replaced by bus services. 2 feet 6 in gauge railways. In many provinces 2 feet 6 in gauge light railways were used for mines, and prominently in Henan and Sichuan they were used for rural transportation. Ironically, most of them were built in an era when most European light railways had started to dwindle in favor of roads. The Shibanshi Railway in Sichuan is being preserved as China's first heritage steam railway. The Bagu Shaanxi Railway is still operating with steam locomotives, partly for heritage purposes. 600 mm gauge railways. 500 mm gauge railways. Sichuan Province Hongbaton Coal Mine near Shenzhenjiao, main coal mine railway line. 400 mm gauge railways. Sichuan Province coal mine at Shuangxianzi between Guangzhou and Meishiling. Other. Arksan Forest Railway. It ran during the 1950s and 1990s, carried wood, goods and passengers. Its highest speed is 60 km per hour. Xinyi Railway. Xinyi Railway was a 42.5 km long branch line of the Beijing-Hankou Railway located in Hebei. It was built in the winter of 1902 to allow the Empress Dowager Cixi to travel from Beijing to the Western Qing tombs. Although the railway had no economic benefit, it was the first railway to be financed and built by the Chinese alone. The Empress Dowager and the Guangzhou Emperor fled to Xian in the aftermath of the Boxer Rebellion. After the Boxer Protocol was signed in September 1901, Cixi and the royal family made the way back from Xian to Beijing in December, taking a special train along the Lohan Railway from Shijiazhuang to Beijing, to atone for the occupation of Beijing by the Eight-Nation Alliance. The Empress first visited the Eastern Qing tombs in April. Afterwards she intended to go to Western Qing tombs. Because of the distance, she thought of traveling by train. The Empress then ordered Governor Yuan Shikai to construct a railway from Gaobidian to Yi County, Hebei, within 6 months at a cost of TLS 600,000. The Xinyi Railway headed west from Gaobidian across 2 rivers. Yuan Shikai originally chose British engineer Claude W. Kinder to carry out the construction. Claude was the Kaiping Tramway's chief engineer, as well as the chief engineer of its extensions. Unexpectedly, this led to a French protest, so Yuan Shikai decided that the Chinese would carry out the construction themselves, appointing Gem Tian Yao chief engineer on the 19th of October. The project started in November and was completed by February 1903. The railway used old track and sleepers from the Guanyi Railway. On 5 April 1903, the Empress and other members of the dynasty rode a special train from the Beijing-Yongdingmen along the Beijing-Hankou line, then switching to the new track. The whole length was about 120 kilometers, taking a little over 2 hours. The Empress was very pleased with the railway and train and gave the engineer a yellow jacket, flowers, feathers, and the title of prefect. I only used the railway once. The line was destroyed during the Second Sino-Japanese War, its track being used to repair other railways. Later, it was repaired and re-gauged during the Great Leap Forward. In the 1990s, it was renamed the Gauyi Railway.